flew there. Am I right, Elma? By plane?
For the Canadian Broadcasting System, they're putting on some talk programs for radio and television this weekend. They've been asking him to come, so they finally said, well, you better make the arrangements this weekend.
Now, I believe most of you friends in here know of my experiences, and those who have not, I think we'll have a little question and answer period after the main speech or talk, so we can ask whatever questions we want. Anything that isn't clear in the way of my own experiences, I'd be glad to talk about, and most any other aspect of this subject. Bring anything up. If we can't answer it, why, we just say we don't know anything about it. Now, I have had definite experiences with space visitors. I know that my own editor has branded them as psychic. That is, that they have arisen from the mind or from my own thoughts. Nevertheless, they were real. Yet, he doesn't want to accept himself the very fact that they were very real. That is, if I say I stepped in a flying saucer, I mean I've walked in it, and I went out in space and hovered over the city of Los Angeles for 1,000 miles, just as I would in an airplane. I have had other experiences which came a little later on, after I had absorbed and digested the first phase of my experiences, in which I spent 7 days on another planet, and yet I never left the Earth. Now I was introduced to an experience which I myself didn't understand. And yet it was given in such a way that I was able to understand even that in time. And even in the book, Secret of the Saucers, which I authored, the entire explanation was not brought out there because I didn't know at the time. Well, maybe it wasn't supposed to be in the book. That's the way space visitors work. I know many of us waited the other night to see if they would hover around Los Angeles. And I myself kept my fingers crossed. I had no faith in the fact that they would appear at all, because I wasn't told directly. Neither were you people. Therefore, you kind of waited around, you were interested. The subject itself is of vital interest, indeed. And those who have a real faith in the fact that we do have space visitors, who are nothing more than elevated brothers from all over the universe, the fact that they didn't show up Wednesday night or any other time when somebody is expecting them doesn't phase your faith at all. It's just like if you have a friend who's been a friend all your life, and he said, I will meet you at such and such a place at 8 o'clock tonight. Now you wait then. If he doesn't show up, he doesn't become your enemy the very minute 8 o'clock sharp because he didn't show up. You'll wait. He may not show up that night at all, but he will have an explanation, a reason. That is, if he's been your lifelong friend and you have faith in him. And you forget all about that appointment. Go on to new ones, and he will not disappoint you again. That's the same way with space visitors, believe me. And I was called on Tuesday afternoon, very late, at 5 o'clock in the evening, by the station, if I would appear, to explain why they might not appear. Well, now that's an awful job for somebody who didn't bring God the program. But it was wonderful. It was about the only way that I would handle it, because I had a suspicion they would not appear, and I had my own reasons. Yet, when I did appear on the program with Tom Duggan, they never asked me once why they didn't appear. Everything but that. So he caught me unawares for the second time. Well, next time I go on a television program, believe me, I want to know in advance the very nature of it, so I won't be disappointing my friends, and I know you friends here don't disappoint me. Now, with my experience in space visitors, the best part of my experience was a growing within me, or let's say an awakening, a realization of what was happening. There were times when I thought maybe it was my mind going astray or getting weak or something. The feelings and unfoldments that I had, I would tell no one. Certainly I could find it nowhere. I saw a mutual understanding in the writings of Shakespeare. But Shakespeare wrote the things of this earth. I saw it in the character of Abraham Lincoln. But Abraham Lincoln was, in a way, a politician, and yet a statesman, of course. And it was down through history. Many people have had illuminations, enlightenments, and moments of what you might call total understanding. At times, those moments are only temporary. They're fleeting. It is now and then no more. And yet you remember everything. At that moment of illumination, you understand everything. It is as though you understand the very behavior of molecules and of atoms, and of why the trees are different from each other, why they're different from grass, why the world is different from the moon. All that comes into one understanding. So I have prepared a talk. I don't know if any of you have heard it before. I found it to be the best talk that I would like to give to those who have faith in space visitors. And if you don't mind, I will read it. Because it was written under inspiration. It was written at one sitting in the typewriter. And it was written entirely by myself, so it's just as though I was speaking personally. So I will get it now. Thank you. Just about a month and a half ago, I came back from a tour up in San Francisco, Sacramento, Santa Cruz, and San Jose, and Oakland. Now, in most of the places where I had spoken before, I gave this very same talk. In the other places where I had not spoken before, I told them of my experiences. Now, as I said, none of you will be left asking of my experiences because we'll either explain them in the question-answer period. Some of you may pick up the little paper here. This, as I noticed, is quite a bit of writing anyhow, and I imagine about half of them are on flying saucers. So we're not missing anything if I don't tell you all of my experiences. I couldn't tell you all of them in 3 days. And this is the talk that has gone with such a good response in Sacramento, in Oakland, and all these cities that I mentioned to you before. In fact, Northern California, as you know, is a little more conservative than Los Angeles. And yet, everyone today is following Los Angeles. When I say Los Angeles, I mean, of course, Southern California. No one knows the bounds of Los Angeles. The boys in Germany used to put them up all there, city limits. All right, greetings. Welcome into the spirit of the geophysical year, the space satellite age, and the entire new awareness which many have entered. Not far off, awaiting all, as eternal as truth is the cosmic splendor. More eternal than all things we know. Perhaps the only real eternity is truth. I mean by that truth in every way. Whatever truth is. It always was and always will be. We are seeking it. It has no beginning and no end. When we think of God, our concepts always fail us, for we limit God by the limit of our concept. But if we think that the truth is, it cannot be moved, and that whatever is the truth, there also is God. Our concept then takes on the beginning of infinity. We taste a small bit of that truly rapturous, divine sense, the cosmic splendor. It cannot be bought nor given you by others. It is you, your divine attachment to the center force of all creation. And it is merely truth becoming part of you for seeking it. It was always there, always will be. The only untruth exists in the limitation and quality of our senses and our inclinations. From the day we were born to the day we shed our bodies, the most natural instinct of man is seeking of that sublime cosmic splendor. But man is limited, even at his present best. He can attain only sorry imitations of it. He seeks it by excitement, by sensual means, and by religious leanings. Some people are so limited in broadness of concept that they feel that real happiness is in man-made things and situations, such as money, property, clothes, sports, and all they can experience for their own ego and their own senses. True, all things make up the world. And by seeking, discovering, and improving the essential things, we gradually come only upon the truth. But most things, nearly everything material we know so far, are temporal. All of them give way to new and better things. So with all religious and spiritual concepts we know so far, they are altered along the way. It is not material that perishes, but man's interpretation and use of material. It is not the truth of religion that perishes, but man's interpretation of it. Those who seek the truth will find themselves on the streams of truth, which streams all lead to the sea of truth. One is immutably bound to reach the shores of that sea and stand before the cosmic splendor. What knowledge he lacks at such a time, the universe will give him in fullness. Yet we cannot enter into that sea. Only when our evolution has perfected us can we enter it to be in the company of the Godhead and His hosts. Indeed, it is doubtful that even the Earth space visitors are always in that cosmic splendor. That they remain on its shores is certain. The greatest proof that Earth has had space visitors for ages is that our greatest recorded literature often mentions them. They have been called such as angels, gods, fairies, guardians, masters, and by many other names. They have manifested themselves always in ways that were understandable to the people of the times involved. They never interfered with our divine evolution, which is simply the finding of the truth by our own initiative. Angels were pictured with wings. Today we know that wings cannot serve anyone a few miles in our upper atmosphere. Out in space, they are worthless. No man on earth could know the ultimate truth. To know that would mean to become that, and to be nearly omnipotent. Man believes that the truth is that which he can understand and interpret. He rebels at any other concept which is brought to his attention, even for some time after he recognizes the truth and his error. New discoveries, theories, social improvements, and all revelations have had to meet terrible resistance, but the truth unfolded just the same. It is clear indeed, to paraphrase an axiom, one and the truth constitutes a majority. And that is the fact. In fact, the truth alone, ladies and gentlemen, would constitute a majority. Nothing in history, that is, nothing true and substantial, has faced more opposition and resistance than the advent of space visitors upon the consciousness of man. But that resistance has been worn thin. Today, the subject is not faced with the ridicule and hostility that it was 2 years ago. In my own experiences, I now feel that I am in a cause which provides many brothers and sisters. What a lonely endeavor this was not very long ago. And I feel sure many of you share this experience. The question is often asked, when did flying saucers first come to observe Earth? But to my consciousness, in this lifetime, they came on May 23rd, 1952. That was only my first awareness, however, of their real existence. Others had been carrying the torch since June 1947, when Kenneth Arnold reported his sighting. Many believe that was the day of the first appearance. Yet armed forces personnel reported such things as Foo Fighters and strange lights in the last years of World War II. Even before this, the movement of the I Am religion, sparked by the book's Unveiled Mysteries and the Magic Presence, both by the founder of the I Am, contain factual enlightenment that will serve tremendously in attuning us to the unfoldment in regard to inhabitants of the universe. But before even these, which emerged in the early 1930s, the book A Dweller on Two Planets was sufficient for the light. This was published about 1860, long before the scientific data contained in this book was even theorized or suspected by the bulk of mankind, or any scientific body. In fact, modern science has not even begun to understand it. And of course, we could find manifestations of space visitors through all the scriptures that underlie our civilization. The Hindu religion stems from them. The Old Testament speaks of little else other than space visitors. And the New Testament, that is the new age of the Christ, is self-evident. From beginning to end, the story of the Nazarene gives vivid evidence of the wondrous emergence of space visitors. Brothers and sisters, we are in the geophysical year, and it begins officially January 1st, 1957. We are in the space satellite eternity. When we attempt to send a space satellite in the space around Earth, it won't be for a month or two, it's forever. We are in the atomic age, and we are in the age of the truest and greatest spiritual truth awakening in all our past history. You who hear this, who read this, are on the threshold of cosmic awareness. One more step, and you stand on the shores of the cosmic splendor. Now, the great question is before us, and that is, if space visitors have been here for ages untold, and much light of their truth was given by Scripture, and such books and beings as mentioned herein, why is the revelation given us so many times, and by so many bearers? That is truly a question. But if we possess cosmic awareness, some cosmic awareness, the answer unfolds before us. The panorama of history tells its own story. For have we not had all things before? If Abraham was, then why was it necessary for David to be? There is only one truth, and one man should be sufficient to reveal it. But one great truth is that God is infinite, and no man knows all the truth. We learn it by gradual and slow evolution. Even God does not interfere with it. Certainly space visitors would not dare. We might ask the same in the science of electricity. If Franklin discovered it in lightning, why did we need Michael Faraday? Or why did we need Clerk Maxwell, or Steinmetz, or Einstein, or any of them after the first one? Again, the answer is self-evident. None of them possess the simple truth. Furthermore, every man, woman, and child is equal and divine. We all give and take something for the whole, which we will find to be truly a oneness. Now, one person knows all the truth, or all of it, and yet it is one thing, very simple. In my own experiences with space visitors, what did I add to the cause? Why did such a limited person as myself have such magnificent experiences? The only answer I have is my coming upon the theory, the nature of infinite entities. This underlies with substance what others could only allude to, or be generally conscious of. It proves that what the other messengers and their books or talks gave forth is founded upon the very dynamic of the universe, which underlies all things we know. Many of you know my experiences, which are real, and very much material, and subsequently backed up by manifestations in the skies. Now, of course, I said they're carried in the little paper, which would take 2 or 3 hours to read, let alone tell of it, and the book in itself, and we'll treat some of them in the next period. Briefly, I tell you that the experiences had to be followed by manifestations by space visitors. For I was too much of the conservative, the unbeliever, the know-it-all, to believe even my own experiences at the time they occurred. On May 23rd, 1952, I was contacted by them by means of guided objects, which spoke to me, and to which I spoke. These proved to be only relay objects, much like a two-way television set. On January 23rd, 1952, or 2 months after the first experience, I was taken for a ride in one of their small crafts, about 1,000 miles above Los Angeles. And this distance reached in less than 4 minutes. From there, I saw the Earth, about 9:30 in the evening. On August 2nd, 1952, I met personally the being behind the voice which spoke to me in the previous contacts just mentioned. In due time, I began to doubt the experiences, but they seemed to know beforehand that this would happen. That is, that I would doubt it. So they gave me just enough time to gather my earth senses again, and then perform substantiating papers in the skies for me. Finally, I believed, and began to understand some of their benign methods. And that meant a new phase was reached, and new experiences given me. Somehow I spent 7 days on one of their mother crafts, which was approximately 10 miles in diameter, the craft itself, made of some transparent crystal plastic substance, and was like a little world of its own, with trees, grass, flowers, and buildings of the same substance as the ship was made of. During these 7 days, my physical body had never left the earth. In fact, this experience did not come into my memory or awareness until 6 months after it happened. It was the first time I had to explain away to myself something unfamiliar to my understanding. But in time it came. There are many ways in which this experience could be given to one by beings who are vastly greater advanced than we. In due time, we of this earth shall come upon all these things. I can explain 3 of those ways. We can treat again in the next period. It's very understandable. Most of you almost know all the 3 ways. Even I cannot understand the entire reality of them. They came to me because I also was a seeker. My seeking was in the fundamental sciences. My faith was an undoubting awareness of a supreme intelligent power. It must be remembered that when a scientist comes upon a discovery, whether it is the solution to a disease or the discovery of a heavenly body, or a new physical law found, it is accompanied by an inexpressible ecstasy. The universe seems then to stand still and smile and sing to that one. The same applies to all those making entry into spiritual unfoldment. Many people have experienced the entry into such a splendor by both paths, that is, scientific and spiritual. Marie Curie, for instance, and Pierre Curie. Very good example. Every fundamental scientist is endowed by no less than a taste of cosmic awareness. Every spiritual luminary is endowed with understandings surpassing even the scientists. Yet, no one has ever been able to fully use the enlightenment, be it in the material or the spiritual. It is up to others to add what is left lacking. My first experience with a taste of cosmic awareness was in December 1945. For no reason apparent to me, I took off from home in Trenton, New Jersey, to vacation for 4 days in Lakewood, New Jersey, a winter resort only 30 miles from Trenton, which is my home. It was snowing fairly heavily. Halfway to Lakewood, the car seemed to take wings of its own. I felt in communion with every human being on earth, though I was driving alone. The car seemed to know the road better than my hands could guide it. There was a cosmic presence all around me. All went into silence, and even the motor seemed to just purr like a kitten. This day changed my life somewhat, and the sense never fully left me. But this was a mere preliminary of what was yet to come. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I arose to eat a sandwich with some sparkling ginger ale sometime in early spring of 1948. This is a little over 3 years later, after the first experience. My head ached from nervous tension. My mind was racing with perturbed questions as to the nature of matter, the atom, and all nature. This was 3 o'clock in the morning. I knew. I got up from bed. I was trying to write something on the virus, the very nature of it, the nucleus of the virus. Instead, the very nucleus and nature of the atom came. I lifted the glass of ginger ale to my eyes to lose myself in its liquid interior while I munched the sandwich. The bubbles rose endlessly from the bottom of the glass to the top. Why was the fundamental nature of the atom so mysterious to us when its true being is so simple? After all, the atoms are no more than mere bubbles in the ether. I set the glass down and pondered as I munched the sandwich. Then I lifted again the glass to my eyes until I could see only the ginger ale and the bubbles. Then it struck. Atoms were mere bubbles in the ether. Matter does not really exist at all. There was the simple answer all the while. Suddenly, the glass before my eyes seemed to become infinite like the universe. I could hear the music of the spheres. The kitchen I sat in no longer existed. All the cosmos stood still for a moment, and myriads of superb beings seemed to be smiling upon me. I felt perfectly healthy for some moments. I did not have a feeling that this concept might be. It was the feeling that this concept was the nature of the universe. And in the course of only several minutes, while I must have sat motionless, engulfed in the glass of that ginger ale, with its rising bubbles, an entire theory was born. All the complex manifestations of all matter paraded beautifully and orderly before my eyes. and truly angelic presences were all around, by untold numbers. Now understand, I didn't see anyone. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything visually. But it was all an inner feeling. Yet they were there. Had anyone mentioned to me of the reality of these feelings, I would have laughed at them at that time, as you can well understand. Of course, from my subsequent experiences, you know, today I've gone far beyond that. That was a superb sense of how every enlightened entity of the universe will pause for a moment and sing the music of the spheres when the humblest one of us comes upon a true thing. A spiritual truth is acknowledged throughout the cosmos in the same manner. And this, what I was seeking, was a scientific truth. Is this not what the great teacher, one of our heavenly hosts, meant when he said that among all the prophets there were none greater than John the Baptist, but that the least one of us who came upon the Holy Spirit, or the least one in heaven, was greater than John? That is cosmic splendor. Before we come to our question and answer period, let us remember some highlights in the pageantry of the modern behaviors of space visitors. Let us keep in mind that no one can escape their observance and vigilance, and that when they want someone to act in their behalf, there is nothing we can do to stop it. Dr. Donald Menzel, the head of the Harvard Astronomy Department, can well attest to this, though he may not be aware of it. He wrote the book and gave the lectures which silenced the press of the United States, but which made the Air Force see red. In his wonderful book that tries to discount flying saucers as merely natural mirages and optical illusions and hallucinations, we can see that a practical scientist applied himself for several precious years to talk about something that he said was all silly and to write a book on it. But space visitors left their very footprints right in his own book. And with the footprints, they also left a bit of evidence of the ecstasy of discovery and the cosmic splendor, which can penetrate the vitals of even such unemotional men as Dr. Menzel himself. Let us see what we find on vital page 3. That's the end of the formal talk here. I know most of you know Dr. Menzel, and he's the nemesis of the flying saucer enthusiasts. Once I asked the Los Angeles Times, Marie Bean, who's a reporter, why the press suddenly became silent. He says, well, Angelucci says there's such a ridiculous slang had taken to the whole thing. Now mind you, such a ridiculous slang had suddenly taken over the flying saucers picture. Well, what was it up until that time, which was about 1953 or 54? From 1947 to 1953, was that the serious slang? The papers are full of flying saucers. That was the ridiculous period. 1947 to 1952, 7 years, a cycle. A 7-year cycle never fails. An octave. So, actually what happened was it took a serious turn. Many people had really begun to believe in them. They were afraid it was going to become a religious foundation. Suddenly the silence. It wasn't Dr. Menzel who silenced the press, or the radio, or television, or any of the media. It was space visitors. They didn't stop gradually because Dr. Menzel spoke to them, or the book came out. They didn't all read it the same day and become influenced that same day. This concerns thousands of people. It was all one day, sudden. And when the news of flying saucers appears, it is also sudden, like anything else. Who stopped the press? Flying saucers. Space visitors. Why? If the press had continued the silly aspect of reporting flying saucers and carrying it over into all kinds of ridiculous aspects, the real work could never take hold. You see? The waking up. The few who really got the seeds. Now Dr. Menzel, had ridiculed the whole thing as far as space visitors and these experiences are concerned. But he says that we could have space visitors, that he would be the last man to say that they wouldn't. That's on the last part of his book. By the way, he says if any of you see anything in the air, report it to me, and I'm going to report it to the Air Force. Now, he has set himself up as an authority for space visitors. Have you seen? One thing, though, I never even noticed myself for quite a long time, was page 3. Now, Dr. Menzel said that they're not even worth talking about. we're wasting newspaper space about, because it only works toward the benefit of a certain few. That is right. Why did he take 2 or 3 years off of his most important work as head of the astrophysics department at Harvard University? The head of it. He says his work is very important, and yet he took 3 years off to investigate flying saucers and write a book on it to discount it. And of course, there's one answer today we have on a technical basis. A book called The Truth About Flying Saucers by Amy Michel, a Frenchman. Technical answer to Dr. Menzel. Now let's see what the space visitors did to him. You know, they spellbind us, they prepare us before a contact or before an experience. And actually, we're not aware of the full experience until after it's over. Let's see what happened with Dr. Menzel. Understand, up to this point, when he's investigating flying saucers, he's going to New Mexico at the same time, study of the sun and whatnot, and he's in the process of writing a book. He has not ever seen anything that he could doubt or couldn't understand. Page 3. I said some of it is really comical, ladies and gentlemen, because you have to see a very serious man, one who prides himself on being unemotional, one who is a very great writer, who no doubt knows his astronomy, but hasn't discovered anything. He's not a fundamentalist. He's just a leader. My studies of the sun take me frequently to Colorado and New Mexico, and I was at the Holloman Air Base near Alamogordo in New Mexico at the height of the flying saucer scare. For the benefit of the recording here, I am quoting Dr. Menzel, page 3. One morning I had glimpsed what seemed to be several saucers moving overhead, until I focused my eyes more clearly and recognized the objects as weather balloons. That afternoon I expressed my belief that most of the saucers could be thus explained. But others in the group, including several well-known scientists, indicated there was probably more to the saucer story than that. I see the scientists themselves believe we have space visitors. But he was unaware of it. He thought they were all on his side. And this is way back 1952. I notice he's beginning to get initiated into the meeting of space visitors. Why did he see these weather balloons? He's a rather old man. Did he see weather balloons all his life? And here they begin to take on a different aspect. You see, he's being prepared, unconscious of the fact, unaware of it himself. Early that evening, I had my second attack of saucers. Now notice the way he describes these things. I was in the back seat of an automobile being driven toward Alamogordo and admiring the full moon as it rose over Sacramento Peak toward the east. Now we raise a question here. A great astronomer admiring the full moon. Why? Only God I should probably not have given the phenomenon a second thought. Under the actual circumstances, I had long wondered what it was that I actually saw. The simpler and more obvious explanations, like wisps of clouds or distant searchlights, did not seem acceptable. But at no time did I have even the slightest suspicion that the objects were of interplanetary origin. I think Harvard University, who put this book out, and Dr. Menzel would give anything to remove page 3. I recently found a reference in an old book by Edward J. Lowe, I'm quoting it, an English meteorologist who mentioned a similar phenomenon observed as long ago as 1838. Similar, except for the fact that he saw 4 instead of 2 ghostly images flying near the moon. Perhaps I should be expected at this point to explain exactly what I saw that evening in New Mexico. I am sorry to say that I cannot explain the phenomenon in every detail, but I do have certain ideas on the subject, which seem to be entirely reasonable. And of course the whole book proceeds with the other ideas. So that's about all for that. You see what they can do with, you notice how beautifully they go? No one is aware of what's going on. Menzel himself isn't, Harvard University. And I, who've been looking for these little pearls left behind in the sick oysters, I failed to see this until almost a year ago. When I read it over again, it brought me an ecstasy. I said, what have we here? Menzel, give me that rapturous feeling? It can't be. But I could hear the music of the spheres on page 3. It was them that put it in there. I believe this is a little intermission time, and I don't know if there's anything else in order. We have 5 or 10 minutes, Alma, and then we can continue. I don't know what the program is. Thank you.
I'm new at this.
Mm-hmm.
What is the end objective of all this? I don't quite get it.
There is a question that really stumps me. See, you're asking me, what is the end objective of all this? Now, I don't know what you mean by that. You can mean one of two things. What is the end objective of the flying saucers, space visitors, and all that is going on around us, the earth around the sun? Or do you mean the end objective of the people themselves involved in it?
Why are we interested in this? What, you go to school and learn mathematics to use it in engineering or auditing or some such thing.
Yes, but do the children know that?
No.
You ask a 5th grader what's his greatest hope. He says that the school burns down.
Well, you see that semi-religious angle to this.
Not semi. At one time, when I was talking like this before people, I said there's nothing religious about this. Now, if we mean that. Now it seems to me be not semi, but all religion. Believe me, I'm a materialist of the first order.
You mean we're going to get a better concept of God through this?
Well,
is that the angle?
Let me.
A higher intelligence on it?
It has done that to me. It has done that to me. And I believe that many people have experienced that. Now let me see. In this way, you see, this is infinite. You couldn't treat it all in one night. We can go on right from where you started, right? That's a very good question. Where to? We don't know. See that picture, Paul Goddess? That means where to? Where are you going? Where does that go? We don't know. But time proves these things of the past have come about. You know, nobody today would be reading the Bible if the Bible hadn't said things which have come about. Or if it hasn't proven a rudder, a keel, a stabilizer, a compass to our way of life. You don't need the Bible in the house, you can throw it out. Pardon my speaking.
Isn't the Bible a pretty good source?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, we can throw it out, and yet, where would we be without it? You see?
I didn't catch that.
Supposing now a man has a Bible in his house, he suddenly decides he doesn't want it anymore. Nothing is going to stop him from picking it up and throwing it out. Tear it up and burn it. What has he got after that?
Nothing.
That's right, nothing. Now we have all this, as you mentioned. What's the meaning of all this? We can throw it all out. Forget it. Let's go about our daily business. What have we got? Nothing. Whither do we go without this? You see? Why have these things appeared? And I was just talking to the gentleman here who was telling me he's been a great believer in all this, and for a long time, for years. Yet, frankly, he has never seen a flying saucer. And that's a good sign, because they love you. You don't need it. Just like many women, they don't need flying saucers. I guess that's an old story now. They're always in one. You see? Now, why? Notice that all the sightings that are ever reported are those from people who don't believe, even after they saw it. Aviators, officials, those that are considered concrete by the government. Now, the government can't tell you what they are. They only say, well, we see this too, but what can we tell you about it? And that's right. Nobody can, unless they accept them in their fullness. Now then, without them, where are we going? Notice that we are going in that direction. January 1st begins the geophysical year. 18 months of intensive study of the universe by every nation on earth. Isn't that nice brotherly blood being circulated among us? Among the intellectuals, you see? And the people will be hearing the results. Russia will come through with some finding. America will come through with a finding. England has to report. Australia has this to find. All over the world. Now, those people that are studying the stars are not thinking of war. You see? There's something real out here, much more real than war. War is a temporal thing. It comes and goes. We didn't need it. We had to go through it. We can take the universe, which is represented right here on Earth. Everything in the universe is representable right here on Earth, and yet we haven't seen it. This is made of one substance. This is made of another. This still another. My fingers, my hands, still other things. Everything that we can see, if it has a different aspect, is a different substance. And yet they all come from 92 elements. Imagine that. But as long as man wasn't willing to look into the nature of things, the study of nature, the meaning of science means the study of nature. Then, a man saw a tree and all he ever saw was a tree. He'd make no other effort. If he wasn't interested in any more than that tree and getting something to eat, that's all he would ever have. You see? But the minute he began to investigate and to postulate some things and relate them one another, and say, look, now these things always behave under certain ways. Physical laws. The other people who weren't interested, naturally, they're going to tell, well, go tell that to someone else. I've got enough troubles here getting something to eat. Furthermore, I'm not interested. You see? That's been the history all through our civilized history, which is very short at best. 5,000 or 6,000 years. It's not long, recorded history. Yet the history of the world is billions of years. Now then, where are we going? Notice the defiance of all those sightings reported have been by people, unbelievers. Why do they show? Why show themselves, or why show themselves at great length to believers? They already believe. They're already there. I thought that this was all new to me when I first came into it. Believe me, I did. And some people here can tell you how very primitive I was when I started. With this experience, who am I going to tell? I thought I was to begin with my own people, my own friends. So I did. I gathered them together, sent out a few cards, but fortunately the papers had some names in there who were interested in flying saucers. Another way I had now become interested. Well, so let me gather this together. And among them were a few young boys who today are still in it. One of them produces a saucer magazine. And of course, who knew about Dan Fry here? I didn't. But this being who contacted me said, you will be alone for a while. You yourself will have to believe this first. You will have to grow up. And until then, you will not even know that there's others who believe you. Because look where you were just a few months ago, on the other side of the fence. So, but, when you do, I smile with love on your enhanced numbers. Enhanced numbers. I didn't know what that meant. Because when I started to speak, I had my own friends there, and there was nothing but laughing. Now, believe me. And I loved it. If they would only listen. And they didn't even listen. And among them was my partner in business, in the floor covering business, Dick Chenoweth, a southerner right from Tennessee, and his mother. She was at the time about 88 years old, very frail, and nearsighted and couldn't see me. And she sat quite far among the group. It was a hall much larger than this. I happened to be there at the drive-in theater where my wife was working, and I had it at my command there. Didn't have to pay rent or anything. That's the only place I could gather them. Now here I was telling them that I wrote a flying saucer. Imagine telling your friends that, who up until this moment knew you only as a floor cover and a very down-to-earth man. And then I could see Mrs. Chenoweth talking to Dick, she was disturbing him. I could see Dick quite disturbed. I didn't hear what she was saying, of course, but I could imagine. And when I asked Dick, he says, oh, well, Orfeo, in his southern drawl, he says, she couldn't see you, you know that. She's nearsighted. She heard your voice. She said, it sounded like you, but she said that. She asked me, she said, I thought I came here to hear Orfeo talk. And Dick said, well, that is Orfeo, Mother, don't you hear him? Well, it sounds like him, but it doesn't look like him. Oh, Mother, you can't see him. I know, but what he's saying doesn't look like him. She said, Mother, that's him, huh? Let's listen to him. He says, my land sakes, she says, he needs to be so sensible. So you see what they had to go through? For what? Why? I didn't know. It all came later. And those people today are different because of my experience and also their own. In fact, they had seen flying saucers long before I did, but they were willing to accept it and still don't accept them as extraterrestrial visitors. And they will swear to tell you they have seen something very unfamiliar to them. We can go on and never explain that question. Why? But it'll unfold. It will, believe me. Let's put it this way. For the time being, if you can't see anything in it, I can't think of anything more interesting. You can always have the other things. It's very rare they can hear things of space visitors. Almost everybody else will call you crazy. But today, thank God, there are thousands of people that will know.
Can I ask you something else?
Yes.
I understand that these flying saucers are in captivity, so to speak. I heard just last last night, or Wednesday night, at one of the airfields. They have one. And there were 3 men aboard it. I'd like to ask, this seems so nebulous. If we have one, why don't we know what
that is true. Now, my position...
Where did those men go?
My position in this, when I hear rumors like this, I feel if this is true, it is news of such tremendous importance that it cannot stay hidden long. If they are in government hands, if they are in captivity in good hands, it won't be long before we know about it. So let's wait until then. It's just like Wednesday night. Everyone waited after the election. Oh, how many people asked, what do you think of this? Dan Fry was bothered by dozens of people. Well, naturally, they looked for him. Well, I was bothered by many. And I don't mean, when I say bothered, I don't mean that bothers me. I mean, I had an answer something, I had no answer for it. Wait till December 7th. See what happens. I had December 7th. November 7th. Let's wait till the date and see what happens. Well, we waited. I went on that television program because I was asked to go in and put my neck out in something I had nothing to do with. Yet I'm in the subject and I'm just as well take every part of it, whether it's unpleasant or pleasant. Well, how do we know? I tried to contact them for 30 days every day. Never responded. Yet when I was least expecting, or when I had diverted my attention to other things, they responded my messages for those 30 days. Now I began to see. Don't try to contact us. We know when you least expect it. We cannot interfere with the ways of earth. Another time I tried to give a signal out in the desert. A round thing with stones, a hydrogen atom, universal signal, or symbol. There was nothing but clear skies. But 3 weeks later, right over my house, they reproduced the same thing. And I knew they were doing it. I was sitting in the kitchen before going to work, and I asked Mabel, she was vacuuming the rug. I said, Mabel, here, put this thing out. Grabbed her by the hand, went out. She said, now what? And suddenly she kind of had a smile on her face. We went outside the door, right over the house. There was the very same symbol. Too small for any airplanes to make. Well, I knew. I didn't have to be told. But if anybody else looking on would think that it was our own airplanes doing it because there were vapor trails in the sky. You see how they hide themselves? It's funny that a lot of those airplanes seem to gather around that circle later, investigating. It was not airplanes doing that. With a dot in the center and the radiation lines that I put in the very signal out in the desert. The only thing that was strange to me was that they had added 4 check marks, like that, on 4 corners of that circle. And that was something entirely new to me, but I knew the answer would come in time. I had learned to abide my time. Those check marks, later on, we began to read of right-angle turns. That was a new phase of flying saucers. Remember this, suddenly they veered the other way without making a curve, something unheard of. Then I began to see the check marks. That's what they... And then not only did they give me my signal back, but they added one, which I would understand in time. Yes?
How, Mr. Angelucci, this is how you were disappointed on November 7th that nothing came through. But I saw something, Mr. Stoneside saw something. You know, several people who also, in different parts of the city, saw things too, that were suddenly UFOs.
Well, I did see something. I didn't say I was disappointed. I wasn't expecting it. That's what I said. I wasn't expecting it. I just look at a thing like that as mere publicity. Well, even if the space visitors are doing that. I've grown above that. I don't need that anymore. You don't either. And you don't. The very fact that you saw a UFO, in spite of the fact, shows that you're attuned to the real thing. I saw something right there in the studio. And in fact, they said that it came on television, that they saw me pointing like this. I wasn't trying to point out anything. I didn't know we were on television then. There was one object came, and it proved out to be an airplane. It was the airplane that Paul Coates and another crowd had said was going to fly to see what it would look like. But wait, what was that other object that came to meet it with a red light? One red light. No sound heard, and then it disappeared. What was that? That's it. Those who have eyes shall see, and those who have no eyes. Could I say that on television? They said I'm crazy. They said, well, we know you make it because look at your story. You see, the general public thinks I just make this up. So I just might as well keep quiet. But I saw it. That's what I was trying to point out. You see? Yes, ma'am.
Angelucci, that same night, my nephew and my daughter and I were outdoors watching because we were running back and forth in the TV to hear you and then running outdoors. Now what we saw was sort of a little green light first. It looked like the size of a star in the distance, a star, with the naked eye. And then we said, oh, look at it go. And from behind it, it looked like the color of a real star from behind. So I couldn't make out whether it was one or two or just one, but they were too tall.
Right.
And my daughter said, oh, no, you just missed something. She saw something that looked like it exploded, like a light bulb exploding, just like that. And she was so excited about it. That we didn't see with my daughter. So.
Sure. There are many manifestations for those who have eyes to see. Yes.
I read an article of yours some time ago, and you mentioned that's where you went to discover his body was
Asteroid.
an asteroid.
At the time, you see. In fact, I didn't think it was an asteroid. I just didn't know where I was. But the book had to have some point of reference in it, so the editor and the writer with me thought, you've got to place something in here because people figure if you don't know yourself, you don't know what you're talking about. You see, you think it was the asteroid of this planet Lucifer? Well, it could be, if the violence of the atmosphere had anything to do with it. But no, it didn't mean that at all. I was suspecting that I was on Venus, but I wasn't sure. Later, after the book was written, the answer came to me. I was on Venus. But I couldn't offer no more explanation than I could then. This was a huge spaceship that I was on, not an asteroid. 10 miles in diameter. A world of their own, and yet far away from the real world and not from Venus. They were on the atmosphere of Venus. And this turbulence that I saw was lightning, thunder, and bull-eyes and whatnot, all very natural to the atmosphere of Venus when it is facing the sun. But it's so dense that we couldn't see it. It's the sun rays, you see, polarizing, ionizing the atmosphere of Venus. What is beneath that atmosphere, I wasn't permitted to see.
You figured that was your astral body
Well, let's say that's one explanation. Another is, let's say that they can give us a drink or influence our mind in such a way as to let us see that. But this was although it was in a different way, it was very physical. Here's what really happened. Notice in my first experience, I drank something. Then I belonged to their world. What it is that they have in these beautiful beverages, I don't know. Very delicious. They're suddenly different. On this occasion, I had quit from Lockheed. I had not quit, I had taken a leave of absence after only a few months' work, and they gave it to me. And Lockheed had its first strike in history then. And you see, as I look back, I was precipitated away from the strike. Because I didn't belong. I was a union member, but I didn't belong neither to the company nor to the strike now. I was on leave of absence, you see, or to the employees. That was strange. And I went home. I went to look at some of the boys who were marching the line, say hello to them, and I felt very brotherly toward them. But I didn't walk it. Asked me to get in. Oh no, I'm on leave of absence, remember? That'd be interference. Well, that was strange. The book says that then I woke up at work. Yes, 6 months later. Actually, I was home all the while. And I found myself at the Rivers Bank. And a neighbor boy, Elton Krug, was asking me, he says, "Orf, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I was just at the bottom of the river looking for some junk." Well, now he knew better, and I did too. But I had to give him an explanation, just like the asteroid. But then I asked myself, well, what am I doing here? Am I coming from somewhere, or am I going somewhere? Yes, I don't remember coming, nor where I'm going. Well, I'm near home, so I'll go home. When I did go home, I had an awful funny feeling. It wasn't home at all. I mean, it was something, my feet felt light. I felt perfectly healthy. I went to the couch. Immediately I felt sleepy, and I don't remember hitting the couch. That's when I woke up in the other planet and saw all these things. What happened was, under that bridge, I was coaxed there, made to come there, by the beautiful way they had of spellbinding us first. Otherwise we could never take the impact. It's terrific, even with all its beauty. But certainly I couldn't, because I study everything I see. But they put you in a position where you don't study, you just know. You understand these things. So I drank something. Now let's see. You know that if you take A doctor today wants to give you iodine for the thyroid. He gives it to you in a tablet or in food, and somehow that iodine finds its way only to the thyroid. And there it does its function. Nowhere else. Calcium will do the same in bones and teeth. Nowhere else. Iron in the blood. Everything has its place, polarizes itself, is attracted at that spot and held there until it is used. Its essence is used, then its polarity is gone. It is now released. It is waste in the body. Metabolism. What happened here was, we take selenium or germanium. They are elements. Alright? In the atomic table, they're way up in there, they're like lead. Selenium and germanium. A little bit of selenium or germanium in a concoction, scientifically mixed, not by us, by those who know how. We drink it. These have selenium and germanium have a beautiful crystal function, and that's what they use today in perfect transistors. They can arrest their, let's say, elements in the subconscious part of the brain. And being of that polarity, they're arrested there, and they assume every vibration, every index, let's say, that those particular brain cells have. And they photograph it. They give the same imprint upon themselves. In other words, the atoms of these molecules adjust themselves in the same position as the atoms in the brain are, so that we have that as memory. Now get this is very physical. So, as soon as they have arranged themselves perfectly, and have gathered all the memory and all that photographic status of that subconscious mind, they are no longer attracted to those brain cells. The polarity has changed, you see, and they are dispelled in the system. Collected again by those who know how. Now look what science is doing with us, with our bloodstream. Anything they want of us, they'll get. Imagine science far superior to ours, far ahead. Collect anything they want, they recollect it, put it in a beverage. Neptune had undergone a 7-day period with the substance. I had undergone a 7-day period. Then we exchanged drinks. You see? He drank of me, and I drank of him. And suddenly, when they became effective, when I began to get that feeling, when I went to sleep, they became very effective. Now, my subconscious mind was taking the imprint, taking the memory of these molecules that is centered around them. And after a 7-day period, they are, these other crystals which one has taken are no longer of that polarity. They lose their photographic self, just like a tape recorder. We can over that with a new, all we had to do is over that with a new recording, and everything else is erased. That's what happens to these, magnetic. Exactly like that. They're dispelled, and I no longer need them. They're no longer any good. Neither does Neptune mind. But in the meantime, my brain, subconscious mind, has taken all of that memory that Neptune had in his world during that time. And he has taken mine. Now, when the subconscious mind gives that off to me, immediately there's turbulence, you see. That's why the explosion in the planet. I acted that way for a half hour. Couldn't seem to bring myself to know what to do. The conscious mind is subdued, and when the subconscious is active, all that comes back. Very, very vivid. It came back to me when I was in the hospital. 3 days. A whole 7-day period, very, very precise. And not until I could explain it fully, in all the ways that it could be done, could I write it.
Oh, I didn't understand any of that. I hadn't read the drawing in class.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And there's another, so help me, believe me, before I had this manuscript all sent into Ray Palmer, and he held it up about a year. In the last year or two, I've done some reading, and I came across A Daughter on Two Planets, the Unveiled Mysteries and the Magic Presence. And I thought, what am I doing here talking? What am I, why me? These men have already given it to the world, but they don't listen. You see? But there's a new awakening to it. A fresh start. Only one thing. In all that we do, I found what was my key. Never lose sight of the one great visitor, of the one great teacher who gave us all that we are ever to know yet. Believe me, I'm taking this very factually. The New Testament gives me space visitors just as 2,000 years ago. The Star of Bethlehem, the ecstasy of the 3 wise men, They knew how they knew where to go. No one told them. They even told Herod that there was a king among them, and Herod was very interested. But wait a minute, he didn't want that news out. He says, wait, look at those three men. Kill them. We can't stand them. No one ever found them or heard of them since. How about those shepherds, who also saw the same thing? And they had nothing but ecstasy to follow. They knew where to go and bring presents. They weren't told the day before. Came right there, like Dr. Menzel, like everyone else. We all have these experiences in one way or another. A dream, which tells you the things that come 2 or 3 weeks hence, ahead, right to the detail. The rare, yes, but almost all of us have had them. That is not a regular dream. But they cannot interfere. We have to become as gods. We have to become of their high station by our own efforts. And as we do show signs in that direction, then more is added. For those who have little shall be given more. You see? Were there any others? Yes, ma'am.
Well, you didn't actually, your physical body, then travel in the spaces of all.
Not in that 7 days, no. The first experience, in which I went up in the air,
You did.
1,000 miles, that was very physical.
You did go in the space station.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. And the ship was almost invisible. But I saw it. Because I was, well, let's say, prepared. Right then. Momentarily. Not more than maybe a minute or two before. And I saw nothing but a mist, sort of a half bubble on the ground.
And walk over to it?
Yes, it seemed to open. Thank you very kindly, Gabriel Green. Now you find friends, both the old and the new, here in Los Angeles. You'll pardon me for just a moment. I just had a little cup of coffee at the table. I'm rather coffee nervous. Why, I was in the habit of extending greetings from Los Angeles to the cities that were not my home whenever lecturing there. Today, I believe I can extend these greetings in reverse. From San Francisco, from Oakland, from Sacramento, from San Jose and Santa Cruz. I just completed a lecture tour there 2 weeks ago, lasting 7 days. I had been there over a year before. We had, in each case, twice the crowd there were in the previous occasion. And I think what Gabriel Green just said to you, that it shows that your efforts are not being wasted, is the truth. Now I noticed a new interest in flying saucers among the people, especially in Sacramento, where I had to speak a little differently from what I spoke in the other places, where they were a little more initiated or enlightened. But Sacramento responded just the same. They were in accord with all that was said. In fact, the people felt it within their own hearts and had experiences themselves, and they represented the cross-section of that capital city of California. Now, I believe many of these other speakers and tours, men who've had contacts with outer world beings, can tell you the same thing. I will not go into details of my experiences, as they are written down. Most of you will come across them if you have not already. But even this talk today is part of the experience. And I myself have learned an awful lot from the first day that I was contacted until this very moment. As I look over the faces and the interest with which it is expected, it reminds me of, well, back to my younger boy, because I lived quite a consecrated life at home, not going out too much. So there's so many there that I can tell you about. I remember that when this had begun to get into second gear for me, my boy used to accompany me. One day he went home to Mom. He said, Mom, you know, you should see, there's a nice bunch of people there, good people. But he had expected to go see a lot of hot rodders, you know. So, You see, we stand, at least among good people, if nothing else. Even the young among us are willing to admit that. I was also inspired to write what I was to talk about. Not only on the tour, but here. And I thank my wife for mentioning it. She tried to prod me for a couple of weeks to write. I couldn't. The day before I left, I sat down at the typewriter, and there it was. So I beg you to be with me, and we will read this and then come to the very interesting parts, the question and answer period. Do not hesitate or be afraid to throw questions at me. I cannot be embarrassed any longer. But this was the lecture that I had planned on, envisioned myself giving to people. Didn't even have a lecture planned at the time except the one in the north. So I said, welcome into the spirit of the geophysical year. I remember that very closely. The space satellite age, not year or decade, but age, we're in it. And the entire new awareness, which many have entered, not far off, awaiting all, as eternal as the truth, is the cosmic splendor. Now, the cosmic splendor is nothing mysterious. It was to me up until this experience. Although I had once had it, I thought it was a peculiar state of affairs with me. I thought I'd better keep it quiet. But I'd learned through reading a book just a couple months ago that other men have had it. Women. The book is called Cosmic Consciousness by Dr. Burke. And I was sure glad to read that because it gives me an awful lot of company. Now, more eternal than all things we know, perhaps the only real eternity, is truth. It has no beginning, no end. When we think of God, our concepts always fail us, for we limit God by the limit of our concept. But if we think that the truth is, it cannot be moved, and that whatever it is, the truth, there also is God, our concept then takes on the beginning of infinity. We taste a small bit of that truly endless, rapturous, divine sense, the cosmic splendor. It cannot be bought, trained for, nor given you by others. It is you, your divine attachment to the center force of all creation. And it is merely truth becoming part of you for seeking it. It was always there, always will be. The only untruth exists in the limitation and quality of our senses and our inclinations. From the day we are born to the day we shed our bodies, the most natural instinct of man is the seeking of that sublime cosmic splendor sense. But man is limited even at his present best. He can attain only sorry imitations of it. He seeks it by excitement, by sensual means. This is all included. And by religious leanings. Some people are so limited in broadness of concept that they feel the real happiness is in man-made things and situations, such as money, property, clothes, sports, and all they can experience for their own ego and their own senses. True, all things make up the world. And I, of course, is part and parcel of it. We cannot escape these things, but not to limit ourselves by them. That is what is meant. And by seeking, discovering, and improving the essential things, we gradually come only upon the truth. But most things, nearly everything material we know so far, are temporal. All of them give way to new and better things. So with all religious and spiritual concepts we know so far, they too are altered along the way. It is not the material that perishes, but man's interpretation of and use of material, which perishes. It is not the truth of the word of religion that perishes, but man's interpretation of it. But those who seek the truth will find themselves on the streams of truth, which all lead to the sea of truth. One is immutably bound to reach the shores of the sea and stand before the cosmic splendor. What knowledge he lacks at such a time, the universe will give in fullness. Yet we cannot enter into that sea. Only when our evolution has perfected us can we enter it to be in the company of the Godhead and His perfected hosts. Indeed, it is doubtful that even the Earth's space visitors are always in that cosmic splendor. That they remain on its shores is certain. The greatest proof that Earth has had space visitors for ages is that our greatest recorded literature often mentions them. They have been called such as angels, gods, fairies, guardians, masters, and by many other names. They have manifested themselves always in ways that were understandable to the people of the times involved. They never interfered with our divine evolution, which is simply the finding of the truth by our own initiative. We remember that fact that they cannot interfere, because many men realize that today. Angels were pictured with wings. Today we know that wings cannot serve anyone a few miles in our upper atmosphere. Out in space, they are worthless. But we have at least 3 books which bring us the most accurate description of space visitors. I have come upon all 3 of these only within the past 2 years. They are A Dweller on 2 Planets, Unveiled Mysteries, and The Magic Presence. No man on earth could know the ultimate truth. To know that would mean to become that, and to be nearly omnipotent. Man believes that the truth is that which he can understand and interpret. He rebels at any other concept which is brought to his attention, even for some time after he recognizes the truth and his error. New discoveries, theories, social improvements, and revelations have had to meet terrible resistance. But the truth unfolded just the same. It is clear indeed that, to paraphrase an axiom, one and the truth constitute a majority. And nothing in history, that is, nothing true and substantial, has faced more opposition and resistance than the advent of space visitors upon the consciousness of man. But that resistance has been worn thin. Today, the subject is not faced with the ridicule and hostility that it was 2 years ago. In my own experiences, I now feel that I am in a cause which gives many brothers and sisters. What a lonely endeavor this was not very long ago. I feel sure many of you share this experience. I remember when I first had the experience, my friends, I had to collect together only my friends, personal friends. But as the flying saucers were still in the papers, there were some names appearing. So I got some from there. And I had about a crowd of 25 at the very most. And of course my friends came merely because I asked them to. But during the course of the talk, explaining to them, very casually, I wrote a flying saucer, you can imagine. Present was a lady, Mrs. Chenoweth, 90 years old, very frail, as southern as Tennessee could make them. And her son was my business partner, Dick. They sat there. During the time I was talking, I could see her talking to Dick. I knew she couldn't see me. She was nearsighted. And after the talk, I asked Dick, I said, "What's Mother saying, Dick?" He said, "Oh, she was just telling me, is that Miss Angelucci I'm hearing?" Dick says, "Yes, Mother, that's Miss Angelucci." "Oh, no, it isn't, Dick. You're spoofing me." He says, "I came here to hear him." He says, "Mother, that's Miss Angelucci." "Land sakes, he used to be such a sensible fella." So, and Dick reminded her to keep quiet because he said this was worth coming 500 miles for just to hear if it was even a big lie. At the end of the meeting, my friends told me that, they figured that I had had enough. "I guess this is it, hey, Orf? Guess you've had enough." I wasn't even listening to them. That was the end, yes, there were ashes, but there was one little glow here and there. And out of those ashes, I've seen such things as now. And one of those embers still glowing was a little boy, a 15-year-old, whom today many of you know as Max B. Miller, the editor of Saucers magazine. He's today 19 years old. He didn't know why I wanted him in this field, and I told him that I would never interfere with him. I'd never upset him. He'd go on about his own business, but once in a while there would be a knock at his door or a telephone call. And we went through an awful lot together, as some of you know. And Max is here present today. I don't know if we have a chance to say a word to him or get him to say a word, but he's doing very wonderful in the Flying Saucer field. Also president of Flying Saucers International. Now we proceed. I feel sure many of you share this experience I just mentioned. The question is often asked, when did flying saucers first come to observe Earth? To my consciousness in this lifetime, they came on May 23rd, 1952. That was only my first awareness, however, of their real existence. Others had been carrying the torch since June 1947, when Kenneth Arnold reported his sighting. Many believe that that was the day of the first appearance. Yet, armed forces personnel reported such things as Foo Fighters and strange lights in the last years of World War II. Even before this, the movement of the I Am religion, sparked by the books Unveiled Mysteries and The Magic Presence, both by the founder of the I Am, contained factual enlightenment that will serve tremendously in attuning us to the unfoldment of the universe in regard to inhabitants of the universe. But before even these, which emerged in the early 1930s, the book A Dweller on Two Planets was sufficient for the light. This was published about 1860, long before the scientific data contained in this book was even theorized or suspected by the bulk of mankind or any scientific body. In fact, modern science has not even begun to understand it. And of course, we could find manifestations of space visitors through all of the scriptures that underlie our civilization. The Hindu religion stems from them. The Old Testament speaks of little else other than space visitors. And the New Testament, the New Age of the Christ, is again self-evident. From beginning to end, the story of the Nazarene, the Christ, gives vivid evidence of the wondrous emergence of space visitors. And those who do not perceive this verity in our age, whatever their established dogma or belief, they will turn to ashes. The consuming flame is already beyond extinguishing. These have trapped themselves in their own folly, and the time is near, very near, when they will have to show the end of the universe, or its boundary lines, a photograph of God, a place of origin of Christ, other than from somewhere out in space. It was the Star of Bethlehem, remember. It did not come from under or inside, out, heaven. Brothers and sisters, we are in the geophysical year. We are in the space satellite eternity. We are in the atomic age, and we are in the age of the truest and greatest spiritual truth awakening in all our past history. You who hear this, who read this, are on the threshold of cosmic awareness. One more step, and you stand on the shores of the cosmic splendor. Now the great question is before us, and that is, if space visitors have been here for ages untold, and much light of their truth was given by Scripture, and such books and beings as mentioned herein, why is the revelation given us so many times by so many bearers? That is truly a question. But if we possess some cosmic awareness, the answer unfolds before us. The panorama of history tells its own story. For, have we not had all things before? If Abraham was, then why was it necessary for David to be? There is only one truth, and one man should be sufficient to reveal it. But one great truth is that God is infinite. And no man knows all the truth. We learn it by gradual and slow evolution. Even God does not interfere with it. Certainly space visitors would not dare. We might ask the same in the science of electricity. If Franklin discovered it in lightning, why did we need Michael Faraday? Why did we need Clerk Maxwell? Or Steinmetz? Or Einstein? Or any of them after the first one? Again, the answer is self-evident. None of them possess the simple whole truth. Furthermore, every man, woman, and child is equal and divine. We all give and take something for the whole, which we will find to be truly a oneness. In my own experiences with space visitors, what did I add to the cause? Why did such a limited person as myself have such magnificent experiences? The only answer I have is my coming upon the theory, the nature of infinite entities. This underlies with substance what others could only allude to, or be generally conscious of. It proves that what the other messengers and their books or talks gave forth is founded upon the very dynamic of the universe, which underlies all things we know. Many of you know of my experiences, real, very much material, and subsequently backed up by manifestations in the skies. For those of you who do not know, we will make available the first phases of the experiences contained in the paper called the 20th Century Times. This is all the details of the first phase, in my own words and word for word. Others have read my book, Secret of the Saucers, and more of you will. Briefly, I tell you that the experiences had to be followed by manifestations by space visitors, for I was too much of the conservative, the unbeliever, the know-it-all, to believe even my own experiences at the time they occurred. On May 23rd, 1952, I was contacted by them by means of guided objects, which spoke to me, and to which I spoke. These proved to be only relay objects, much like a two-way television set. On July 23rd, 1952, I was taken for a ride in one of their small crafts, about 1,000 miles above Los Angeles, and this distance reached in less than 4 minutes. From there, I saw the Earth, about 9:30 in the evening. And then on August 2nd, 1952, I met personally the being behind the voice which spoke to me in the previous context just mentioned. In due time, I began to doubt the experiences. But they seemed to know beforehand that this would happen. That is, these visitors. So they gave me just enough time to gather my earth senses again, and then performed substantiating capers in the skies for me. Finally, I believed, and began to understand some of their benign methods. That meant a new phase was reached, and new experiences given me. I spent 7 days on one of their mother crafts, which was approximately 10 miles in diameter, made of some transparent crystal plastic substance, and was like a little world of its own, with trees, grass, flowers, and buildings of the same substance as the ship was made of. During these 7 days, my physical body had never left the earth. In fact, this experience did not come into my memory or awareness until 6 months after it happened. It was the first time I had to explain away to myself something unfamiliar to my understanding. But in time, it came. There are many ways in which this experience could be given to one by beings who are vastly greater advanced than we. Only one way, there's many ways. In due time, we of this earth shall come upon all these things. Now, if some of you want to bring it up in the question and answer period, as how these can be done, we'd be glad to treat it briefly. Even I cannot understand the entire reality of them. They came to me because I also was a seeker. My seeking was in the fundamental sciences. My faith was an undoubting awareness of a supreme intelligent power. It must be remembered that when a scientist comes upon a discovery, whether it is the solution to a disease, or the discovery of a heavenly body, or a new physical law found, it is accompanied by an inexpressible ecstasy. The universe seems then to stand still, and smile and sing to that one. The same applies to all those making entry into spiritual unfoldment. Many people have experienced the entry into such a splendor by both paths. Madame Curie and Pierre Curie, shining example. Every fundamental scientist is endowed by no less than a taste of cosmic awareness. Every spiritual luminary is endowed with understandings surpassing even the scientists. Yet, no one has ever been able to fully use the enlightenment, be it in the material or the spiritual. It is up to others to add what is left lacking. We all belong into that, at least one of us. Remember our great lesson. My first experience with a taste of cosmic awareness was in December 1945. For no reason apparent to me, I took off from home in Trenton, New Jersey, to vacation for 4 days in Lakewood, New Jersey, a winter resort only 30 miles from Trenton. It was snowing fairly heavily. Halfway to Lakewood, the car seemed to take wings of its own. I felt in communion with every human being on earth, though I was driving alone. The car seemed to know the road better than I. There was a cosmic presence all around me. All went into silence, and even the motor seemed to just purr like a kitten. This day changed my life somewhat, and the sense never fully left me. But this was a mere preliminary of what was yet to come. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I arose to eat a sandwich with some sparkling ginger ale sometime in early spring of 1948. It was about a little less than 3 years after. My head ached from nervous tension. My mind was racing with perturbed questions as to the nature of matter, the atom, and all nature. I lifted the glass of ginger ale to my eyes to lose myself in its liquid interior while I munched the sandwich, just looking at this glass and watching the bubbles coming up. The bubbles rose endlessly from the bottom of the glass to the top. Now these are the questions I was asking myself, groping for the nature of the atom itself. Why was the fundamental nature of the atom so mysterious to us, when its true being is so simple? After all, the atoms are no more than mere bubbles in the ether. I set the glass down and pondered as I munched the sandwich. And I lifted again the glass to my eyes, until I could see only the ginger ale and bubbles. Then it struck. Atoms were bubbles in the ether. There was the simple answer all the while. Suddenly the glass before my eyes seemed to become infinite, like the universe. I could hear the music of the spheres. The kitchen I sat in no longer existed. All the cosmos stood still for a moment, and myriads of superb beings seemed to be smiling upon me. I felt perfectly healthy for some moments. I did not have a feeling that this concept might be. It was the feeling that this concept was the nature of the universe. And in the course of only several minutes, while I must have sat motionless, engulfed in the glass of that ginger ale, with its rising bubbles, an entire theory was born. A couple minutes. All the complex manifestations of all matter paraded beautifully and orderly before my eyes. And truly, angelic presences were all around, by untold numbers. That was a superb sense of how every enlightened entity of the universe will pause for a moment and sing the music of the spheres when the humblest one of us comes upon a true thing. A spiritual truth is acknowledged throughout the cosmos in the same manner. Is this not what the great teacher, one of our heavenly hosts, meant when he said that among all the prophets there were none greater than John the Baptist, but that the least one of us who came upon the Holy Spirit, or the least one in heaven, was greater than John? Cosmic splendor can only go in the one direction. It's the same for everybody. Before we come to our question and answer period, let us remember some highlights in the pageantry of the modern behaviors of space visitors. Let us keep in mind that no one can escape their observance and vigilance, and that when they want someone to act in their behalf, there is nothing we can do to stop it. Dr. Donald Menza, the head of the Harvard Astronomy Department, can well attest to this. Incidentally, right here, I wish to interrupt that there is a book, a direct answer to Dr. Menza, and it's called The Truth About Flying Saucers by Amy Michel, a French physicist. Wonderful book, by perhaps a greater physicist than Dr. Menza, taking the opposite view. So you see, all things are given us in due time. We need it, both books. Dr. Donald Menzel, the head of the Harvard Astronomy Department, can well attest to this, though he may not be aware of it. He wrote the book and gave the lectures which silenced the press of the United States, but which made the Air Force see red. In his wonderful book that tries to discount flying saucers as merely natural mirages, optical illusions, and hallucinations, we can see that a practical scientist applied himself for several precious years. Yet he says there's something silly. But here's Dr. Menzel working for 3 years on his book. And yet he's supposed to be a very important scientist, head of the astronomy department of Harvard. The space visitors left their very footprints right in his own book. And with the footprints, they also left a bit of evidence of the ecstasy of discovery and the cosmic splendor which can penetrate the vitals of even such unemotional men as Dr. Menzel himself. Let us see what we find on vital page 3. Just as a matter of interest, I think the fact that it's on page 3 is very symbolic. It is to me. I read this book twice before I ever noticed the pearl that was hidden in it. This is a sick oyster. The book itself, we can liken it to a sick oyster. But there's a pearl in it. But we must find it. Remember, for those who have eyes to see, The meek shall inherit the earth, because everything works for the meek. Now, many of you who have known of my experiences know that I often talk of their seeming to spellbind me before the contact. I still insist on that. Now I know that they did, because I have seen others spellbound before my very eyes and by them, merely for the purpose of telling me this is the way you look when we have you under our control. Dr. Menzel, proceeding in his best efforts, with the aid of all science, except those scientists who disagree with him, and they're about more than half, writing a wonderful book, put out by Harvard Press, and this was in the early part of all the flying saucer pageantry. Yet, on page 3, let us see what he's going. Now, he's not aware that he's putting this page in here, and neither was Harvard. Neither were the thousands of people in Rome during that Rome sighting in the fall of 1954. I'd like to repeat that. This also comes under the heading of spellbinding. Spellbound, or let us say, in their control for a while. He says here, my studies of the sun take me frequently to Colorado and New Mexico. And I was at the Holloman Air Base near Alamogordo, New Mexico, at the height of the flying saucer scare. One morning I had glimpsed what seemed to be several saucers moving overhead, until I focused my eyes more clearly and recognized the objects as weather balloons. Now this is Dr. Menzel. Notice he's being prepared. All his life he's not interested in looking at weather balloons, only in astronomy, the star bodies. He has never discovered anything. But he's a top-notcher just the same. Notice they're preparing him the day before. Look in the skies, you'll be seeing something. It's exactly all of our experiences was somewhat gradual. That afternoon, I expressed my belief that most of the saucers would be thus explained. He, of course, expressed his belief at the Holloman Air Base. But others in the group, including several well-known scientists, indicated that there was probably more to the saucer story than that. He admits clearly here that quite a few scientists believe that we have something from another world. Early that evening, I had my second attack of saucers. Now he is really getting it now. I was in the back seat of an automobile, being driven toward Alamogordo, and admiring the full moon. Dr. Menzel admiring the full moon. Well, it should be something very casual to him. The great astronomer. I noticed what seemed to be a bright star, and then a second star appeared, not far from the first. It appeared. Casually, by the way, remember this is one of the best sightings in history. I assumed that they were, Castor and Pollux in the constellation Gemini. Then, very suddenly, he's going into the cosmic awareness. I realized that Gemini was a winter object. The two stars had to be something else. Like most astronomers, I am always hopeful of finding a nova, a star that has exploded and thus become exceptionally bright. I rapidly opened the window of the car for a better look. Grace Stoichel, Dr. Menzel suddenly becoming like a little child, seeing a rabbit running across the field. To my surprise, I could bring neither of these objects into clear focus, although nearby Antares was quite sharp. There's no doubt, notice, he's taking a lot of these things in consideration. Any contact at the moment takes many things in consideration. These were hazy, but they were not stars. His eyes were good because he could see nearby Antares very clearly. Notice all the tests he's giving himself. Both hazy discs shone a slightly bluish light. It's white hot. They were, in a sense, flying simply because they were elevated. Suddenly alive to the fact that I was seeing something unusual, I asked the driver to stop. Master, Dr. Menzel, right now, he's out Holloman Air Base to check the saucers and disprove them. Tell the driver to stop. There's two saucers in the air. Can you picture it? We climbed out of the car just in time to see the saucers literally fade away as mysteriously as they had appeared. I reported the occurrence in detail to the Air Force. Now, you can imagine Dr. Menzel humbling himself to the Air Force. I saw two saucers myself. Had it not been for the current flying saucer publicity, I should probably not have given the phenomenon a second thought. under the actual circumstances, I have long wondered what it was that I actually saw. The simpler and more obvious explanations, like wisps of clouds or distant searchlights, did not seem acceptable. But at no time did I have even the slightest suspicion that the objects were of interplanetary origin. You just forgot he was in a spell just a moment ago. It's done so gently you'll never know it. I recently found a reference in an old book by Edward J. Lowe, an English meteorologist, who mentioned a similar phenomenon observed as long ago as 1838. Similar, except for the fact that he saw 4 instead of 2 ghostly images flying near the moon. Perhaps I shall be expected at this point to explain exactly what I saw that evening in New Mexico. I am sorry to say that I cannot explain the phenomenon in every detail, but I do have some certain ideas on the subject which seem to be entirely reasonable. I shall explain those ideas, but first let me say what I do not believe. I do not believe that what I saw or anything anyone else has reported seeing were missiles or messengers or vehicles from Venus or the moon, or Mars or space. I do not believe they were missiles or messengers or vehicles from Russia or any other foreign country. I do not believe that the exploding of the atom bomb was in any way a direct cause of the saucers. There's writing in there that he probably wished he had never written. I wish I had written that page in my book. So you see, they can leave their footprints, even in mud, and leave it remaining there. Some years ago, we had said at a meeting that they could take every newspaper after they're printed out on the street and revise every letter within a few seconds. That's all possible. Now, we were saying that space visitors do not interfere with our evolution. And I think most of you know what that means, and most of you agree. None of us interfere with anyone's evolution, even though we think we do. We may force someone to go and hear a lesson or send children to school. It's not interference. That's part of our evolution. Those who have the light bring others to the light. Not those who have reached ultimate light. That is, as compared to this world, they can no longer interfere with us. That is in God's hand. And incidentally, when you're in communion with God, or in reverie, nobody interferes. Space visitors draw back. But here's Willie Lee himself, currently writing in the American Weekly section of the Hearst Syndicate. And he's very material, one of the good writers in science fiction, pretty scientific-minded, full of errors, though. Nevertheless, very materialistic, writes to the general public. You wouldn't think that he's aware of such a thing as leave evolution alone. And yet, perhaps unwittingly, here it is, right in his own works, in his own writing, coming right from the, I think there's an article today, too, in the Examiner, in the Examiner part, rather. He says right here, under War Preventive, but if the First Nation does not succeed in establishing a space station sufficiently far ahead of another nation, or if it is civilized enough not to interfere, and he has not in a big letter, not to interfere with another nation's effort, the final outcome would be the existence of at least 2 space stations of different nationalities. That's all for that. I mean, even they can see that at a moment when we reach that, we don't interfere with the evolution of another. We here on Earth do not interfere with the evolution of other nations, except when they overstep. Science does not interfere with another university. Whatever they get, regardless of how crazy it sounds, that's what to investigate. No interference. See what you get. You may come up with a problem which we can't, although we're working for the same thing. Now, some of my experiences with space visitors were principally because I had come upon one little fundamental principle of nature. That was all that was required. The experiences themselves changed me. They didn't change me. They would not give me any further experiences until I was willing to let the material side now rest, as the whole world was involved in it in laboratories, and take on something within myself. I must be elegant enough within my own heart. I don't mean that I must live that life on earth, but in dealing with them, they must know that they would not be interfering or influencing my behavior in any way whatsoever. That would be interference with my evolution. In that case, the one responsible would have to suffer for it. I believe many of you have gathered it from my own stories. Now, the experiences lasted right on to this very moment. In fact, the last year and 4 months or so was spent by me being very quiet, very inactive, getting right down to earth. I could have branched out into business, which I'm going to now. I was learning the earthly lesson. Why so many people suffer. What it means to be penniless when all you have to do is reach out and claim it. What it means to be helpless even with a good soul within. What it means to be young, reaching, not understanding, and to receive tolerance and understanding from the older. We have a younger generation coming up, and it's lower than we are, not better. Therefore fresher. They're going to school. And I've heard from one school that the teacher actually took time off their lessons to tell them, one child mentioned something about flying saucers. She said, look, don't ever believe anything about flying saucers. There's just nothing there. Well, you know that they're fighting a losing battle. These people eventually have got to come to our side because the world is going into that side. The children know more about space visitors and flying saucers than we, even with experiences, because the children are endowed with that freshness of the soul. But it is the necessities of the world, the falsities of the world, that warp them later on. If we could just bring the children in school, just once a week, and let them have their say for 1/2 hour, what do they believe the history of the future will be like? Instead of inculcating in their minds the history of the past, day after day, for hours, dates that mean nothing any longer, what will the future be like? We will really get some answers. Space visitors themselves will be dancing in the skies, because then they can descend among us, caper more, manifest themselves more, then they know that we're saved. Materially, we're going in that direction. Spiritually, we have been prepared. Notice, 7 years we've had preparation. First, the flying saucers were in the newspapers, and as long as they were a light subject, something that could be laughed off, fine, there were headlines. But then it took a sudden turn. Somewhere inside, a seed was planted. Suddenly, everything was quiet. We needed that quiet for the real work to take root. If the newspapers, magazines, and radio were still treating it today as they were 4 years ago, I brought this up several times in the beginning. I could see in advance then. Now I'm looking in retrospect, and still stands true. All our work could not have been accomplished. When I had last talked up the north of California, over a year ago, I came away with a feeling that those people needed something. I knew I had it, but I just couldn't bring it to them suddenly, all at once. But what was it? I myself didn't know. But I knew time to bring it out, if I would just wait patiently. Because this, I have noticed, with my mission, it goes in stages, phases. Become master of one phase, then you get the next phase. Halfway down, I began to see the desert country, the green, turning to semi-desert. And there I felt suddenly at home in Los Angeles. I was riding all alone. And I thought, there's what we have. As long as there's a Los Angeles, all these new minds, all these new thoughts, whether they're from the remotest little town or out on a farm somewhere, Los Angeles is their mecca, is their stronghold and their buttress. I can see now why I myself was precipitated to live here in Los Angeles. Don't be afraid of new thought, regardless how fantastic. In Los Angeles, you're protected. You have thousands and thousands of brothers and sisters, regardless of how wild. Sure, it's not all good. You'll find the good if you go after the truth. Now, let's keep Los Angeles different and fresh, alive with new thought. I've heard many of my friends coming from back home where I came from said when they came to Los Angeles, they felt something different, as they have suddenly become professors. As you start to profess, and you'll find everybody else here is a professor. So, we will come to a little more if we have time later. We'll take a little 5 or 10 minute intermission. I know what Mr. Green has to say. And we sure want to thank him for sponsoring such talks here. And I'll be a little more active in the future than I have been in the past. And I think many of you will. Then we'll be back with the question and answer period. Don't be afraid to fire any of them at me.
always think after such a build-up, if I can only be half as good as people say I am, then I will be much better than I ever was before.
Seems as though we will have to just call them out, have the people raise their hands, and incidentally, my new phase in this, I forgot to mention before in the formal talk, even up north, something seemed to be lacking. Then I remembered the book of Truman Bethlehem, Aboard a Flying Saucer. And when that first came out, and I read it, I was rather peeved when I came to bold letters near the beginning, and Truman said, as far as I know, I am the first Earthman to ever have been aboard a flying saucer. Well, had he come across the little 20th Century Times about a year and a half before that, he would have found me already having ridden him with him. But that's neither here nor there. Most of us who've had experiences have kind of been detached from each other. That's the beauty of it. Every one, if you will notice, adds something. Not one has retracted a word. Not one has ever been exposed. If there have been maybe a few wrong impressions obtained even by the contactee himself, it's permissible. In my own, I had to kind of be very careful. I made many mistakes in the beginning. Notice that I was going haywire, and I was going haywire personally. I noticed the Truman Veterans book, all through, depicts space visitors of the same type I met, and I believe Mr. Dan Fry, and I think Dan Fry is here today. Hope to see him and talk to you a little later, Dan. I know Elma Fry is. Why, when the public very soon will be groping for more information along this line, because the newspapers and magazines are going to certainly treat the geophysical year, the space satellite program, the new findings in our laboratories, Truman Veterans' book will serve as the book which will bring it to the public. It's understandable, it's neat, fresh, all the way through, presents nothing but his experiences and his personal experiences. That first book of his, I don't know if there's a second, doesn't say what Venus looks like, just exactly what Arthur Rain said. So you can depend that book will be one of the greatest circulated book in this field. I don't know how soon in the future, but it will be. And I always insist now wherever I go that I have a few with me, because some people may want to get them. I'm not making a thing out of it. It doesn't matter, I just believe in it. So I believe we had a hand raised over in this direction. Yes, ma'am. We'll have to speak a little louder, ma'am. I can hardly. How does one contact the saucers? I tried myself one time for 30 days and failed. And I had learned just to believe in them, and it would come on their own. When they're ready, they make the contact. Believe me, I do not know how. I believe that any path of enlightenment would work, providing the individual is ready and providing space visitors themselves feel it's the time. It's about all that I know how to answer that. Yes. What do these people look like? You've answered it right in the question. People. Right there. Precisely. Yes. That I don't know, man. When I read, while I was having my experiences, several people gave me books to read, and I just couldn't go through them all. It was impossible. In the beginning, I would read no book. It had to come through me, by myself. When I figured that I was back at Earth, then I could read. I intended to read very little of Unveiled Mysteries. And I read one page, and of course it just it demanded to be read on page 2. And that demanded I turned to page 3. I just couldn't leave it. Guy Ballard, who wrote it under the pen name of Godfrey Ray King. In both books, he used the name Godfrey Ray King. Later, the activity became great, had 1 million followers, as I learned. Something along the line, they say something, well, of course, he passed away in 1940. Whatever happened, doesn't matter. I could see at the end of the second book, The Magic Presence, the end of the message, the end of the reality was complete. Now, probably Godfrey Ray King, who immediately after resumed his original name of Guy Ballard. Oh, you mean if it is the same people that have contacted me as contacted the masters who contacted, yeah, Godfrey Ray King? I wouldn't know. I would think so. They gave the same information. They work by crystal function, subtle forces of the universe which underlie all matter, showing the great, anybody else reading that book, the layman would think, unless one is initiated to it, would think that it was all magical talk. It isn't. Very concrete, very real. It goes into the spirit. It actually brings the material and the spiritual together. Because matter is spiritual, once we see it that way. So I wouldn't know whether it was I believe it was the same ones, but they presented themselves always differently, according to the personality involved. Yes, ma'am?
I understand you're building a building, are you not?
Not me. No, I'm renting one.
Well, I know. I thought the Flying Saucer people gave you the instructions to build that building up there.
Oh, in the desert?
Yes, in the desert.
That isn't me, man. It's the George Van Tassel.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he's building. Mm-hmm. Yes, I go up there quite a bit.
How are they coming along?
That I don't know. I just get the proceedings, through the proceedings. He's busy enough, and unless I can give him any help, why, there's no use in me finding much. I think it was, yes, ma'am.
Do they wear black or some other color, or what about the...
Well, all colors, man. Yes, all colors. In fact, this 10-mile diameter ship that I was in had little houses for each person, and the colors changed periodically, every few seconds. No one was painting them, just the hues changing from one color, from one hue to another. The grass changed color, well, only shades of green, things like that. So they're full of color. They know their science much greater, vastly greater than we do. Yes? Well, man, they do not speak different languages. They speak a language. No matter what being it is, even if it is an animal, it has to have some way of communication that the creation has given us. So their language would be different from ours. But they always spoke to me in English. I only remember very little of their language. And it does resemble the Spanish. It resembles the Spanish. But I don't know the first word in Spanish except that it resembles Italian. But any one of them can speak all of our languages here on earth very simply.
That's really what I meant.
They can learn our language here just as long as it would take them to read the words we have. They would know just where each word fits. We have men on this earth that know 60 languages. Photographic minds. They'll read a big book and remember every word in there. When you take a brain perfectly developed as space visitors, that book is nothing to them. The language, they hear it once and that is it. Yes?
Isn't that said on all of the tapes? Does that mean, is that one of the words?
Adure Basu?
Adine Basu. I heard that on the tape.
Well, those tapes that you mentioned, I've heard quite a bit about those tapes, but they're not mine. And I cannot interfere one way or the other with them. It does resemble the only words I remember, 7 words. And they are exactly 7 in their own language. When I thought or voiced my opinion to Lyra that I have lost weight, or I have gained weight, rather, to see in the other world, I was actually Neptune. And actually, Orfeo was a thin fellow. Neptune was a little huskier. She says, "Oh, entonces peso." Well, I never gave that sentence a thought, but it came back to me right here, and that's the only one I remember. No, you have lost weight. You see? So, incidentally, I never remember all of the details. And it came to light for me not too long ago why I don't remember all the details of my experiences. It suddenly occurred to me that if I did, I could no longer live here on earth. So, you see how mercifully it is all obliterated from your memory except the essential parts. Yes, All right, this lady here.
With that scripture, eye has not seen, or ear has not heard what God has prepared for them that love Him. That's coming to be the same way.
I can't repeat all that. I don't know if I all heard you. Right here? All right.
Eye has not seen, and ear has not heard what God has prepared for them that love Him.
Definitely. We're only finding out some of His wonders. In fact, we don't know ourselves yet, and we're the greatest wonders in the universe. Yes?
Were you and your sister without it when you went in the experience?
No, I was not. The first experience, yes, right in my physical body. The second,
How did you get there?
I walked right into it and sat on a very comfortable chair, and I noticed no instruments of any kind, not even a knob, except a coin which I picked up. I knew it was for me to pick up as I sat in the chair, and I found that I always had to change my hold on it. It seemed alive, a little bit alive, yet it was just the same temperature as my body. After a half hour, it was gone completely, evaporated through the process of sublimation from remote control. So this was on Hyperion Avenue, rather the Hyperion Avenue Bridge, underneath. Then we shot right up 1,000 miles in space in 4 minutes. Now I can't go through all that experience, that would require another few hours right here. But it's contained in the little 20th Century Times, it's made available to everybody. It's brought down to 10 cents. And whoever can afford it and is vitally interested in this, pick it up anyhow. Don't hesitate, their stories contain word for word. Alright. Next, yes? A coin, just a coin, a metallic coin. And it disappeared from my hand. Eventually, they grew smaller and smaller. Just like ice melting. No, I dream of finding a lot of money. It starts off with a few dimes and then it gets into the big money. When I wake up, it isn't there, but that's about the only time the coins do appear to me. That might be an appearance. Yes,
I'm sorry, Orfeo. I think we'll have to draw the question period to a close. Thank you very much. It was very interesting and educational. Thank you.